Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Simon from Scar Illustration, and I hope you're keeping well. In this video, I'm going to go through my process for creating this year's entry to the Megadeth Christmas Card competition. Let's dive in. So this is a competition that's been going on for a while now. And the first time I entered was back in 2011. For that particular competition, I only found out about it like 4 days beforehand. And so I decided that I was going to, try and pull one out of the bag on that one. I worked a crazy amount of hours to get it done. I only just managed to finish it before the deadline. I sent it off, and lo and behold, I actually won that competition. I got to speak to Dave Mustaine himself on the phone on Christmas Day, so that was pretty amazing. Since then, I've entered the competition quite a few times. And I think a couple of times since then I've placed, in the top 10. Including this year where I placed 7th, which I was pretty proud of. So for this idea, I decided that I was going to spend a lot more time researching the concept, rather than just coming up with a pretty picture. I looked at a ton of album covers, I looked at merch, and I looked at past Christmas card winners to get some ideas. When I was going through all that, I noticed that the main character, Vic Rattlehead, was never depicted from what I've seen as skiing. And so I decided to go with that basic idea and went from there. Once I decided on that concept, I went ahead and started gathering reference and getting all the things that I thought I might need. After that, I created a final sketch. I also wanted to add some more subtle elements into the final painting, or Easter eggs. So I added No More Mr. Nice Guy onto the skis, Noel onto the backpack straps, Silent Night onto one of the missiles, and changed the bottom of the ski poles to a radiation symbol. So on to the final painting. I started with the most challenging aspect, which was Vic's face. Once the face was roughed in, I moved on to his outfit. Now his outfit had a lot of folds. In fact, I felt there were altogether too many folds. So I went ahead and simplified them for a more interesting design. After that, I moved on to the furry parts of his outfit. I didn't want these to be just a shape. I wanted there to be some depth and definition on there. Once that was done, I moved on to the sack of presents. The sack also had a lot of folds, which I then simplified again, because I didn't want to take away too much from the main character. At the end of the day, it's just a secondary element and not as important. Then I moved on to the boots. I added in all the details, highlights, and shadows so that everything made sense basically. Then it was on to the gloves. I decided to give him black gloves rather than the atypical white ones. Like the boots, the gloves needed to look like they were made of leather. So I had to indicate a certain amount of reflection going on there. Then I moved back down to the skis and spent some time getting those to look the way that I wanted them to. It's funny because I put all this effort and detail into the skis, boots, and straps, and then ended up covering them with snow and what have you. After those were done, I moved on to the presents and the missiles in the background. A little bit of research was required for these to make them look realistic. I also had the idea that I was going to have an RPG missile on there as well. But I ended up not keeping it in because it seemed unnecessary, and it kind of cluttered up everything, to be honest with you. The presents I left as basic cardboard boxes that were a bit scuffed up. I didn't want anything too complicated on there, so as to detract from, Vic, the main character. And so I ended up just putting the radiation symbol on there, as well as just a simple O. Then I moved back down to the skis again and accentuated the No More Mr. Nice Guy lettering on the top of the skis. I also indicated a high gloss finish on the skis as well. Then I moved on to the candy cane ski poles, which I thought was kind of a fun little idea. Once those were done, I then moved on to the nuclear explosion. Now the explosion was a bit tricky to get right. I went over it quite a few times because I wasn't really happy with the way it was looking. Just getting the different elements to look correct, so it looked like an explosion. I had the idea that I would have this other cloud going around the explosion as I've seen on pictures, but I ended up not going with it because it didn't look quite right. Then I moved on to the red clouds in the background that were coming off the explosion, and once I was happy-ish with those, I moved on to the chairlift. Now for the chairlift, I had some reference obviously, but I also had to make it look like the chairlift was falling apart, so that took a bit of doing. And also, the people that were falling off the chairlift had to look like they were actually falling off rather than just flying or something. I painted some skis and snowboards, flying through the air and stuff. And then I had to put some highlights onto the characters. I ended up blurring them a bit so that they looked like they were really moving. Then I added some clouds coming away from the main nuclear explosion, which I ended up getting rid of in the end anyway. Then I moved on to the snowy mountain area in the background. I didn't add too much detail in there, just an indication of what it was. Then I moved back over to the main character. I still wasn't really happy with the folds, so I simplified those even more. And I also fixed up the straps on the skis, which didn't really make sense to me. Once that was done, I moved back to the face because the hooks didn't look quite right, or the teeth for that matter. The hooks seemed too thick and they looked a bit weird, so I got rid of those. Redid the teeth, the areas around the jaw, and the cheekbones. And then I repainted the hooks. I was happier with how the teeth and the hooks looked, and decided to call those finished. There's a point where you can just add more and more details, but in the end, it doesn't really make any difference. Diminishing returns, as it were. After that was done, I started putting in the rim light from the explosion onto Vic. And then the rim light on the missiles and all the presents. When painting rim lights, I find you kind of have to make it go around the forms to make the character look voluminous, rather than just a line. And as I didn't have reference for that, I kind of had to make it up. Then I moved on to the snow in the foreground. I didn't want it to look like it was some sort of majorly groomed run. I wanted the snow to look rough, bumpy, and more natural. Then I added some flying snow and snow clouds coming off the skis to suggest movement. I spent a fair amount of time getting the shapes correct, as well as something that looks pleasing to the eye. This was pretty tricky to get right, and I ended up painting it a few times. I then added in some speed or wind lines, but I ended up getting rid of most of them and only kept the ones that were coming off the skis. Then I moved on to the logo, as I wanted to add some snow and ice to it, without adding too much detail, of course. I ended up changing the color from orange-yellow to blue-black, as it seemed to stand out a bit better overall. I also changed the Merry Christmas text as the one that was there was just for placement. Once that was done, I went back to the explosion as it didn't really seem to ring true. So I added a flash point at the bottom so it looked more like an explosion rather than just some sort of fiery cloud or something. Then it was a case of just going over everything and making sure I was happy with all the details. Hope this was helpful, and let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. Please consider liking this video and subscribe to my channel. Have a good one, and keep on painting.